this year is off the map. I have no intentions, no licenses, I'm done.
For over 30 years, Tony Beets lived a life no one could imagine. The miner you know from TV was only half the story. Behind the scenes, he carried secrets, risks, and a hidden world that could change everything you thought you knew. Now, the truth about his double life is finally coming to light. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to discover will leave you speechless.
No, I never regretted buying dress number 2. As a matter of fact, I really hope to make that thing work one of these days.
Tony Beets was born on December 15, 1959, in Weidens, Netherlands. He was the eldest child in a modest farming family. Life was quiet, but never easy. From the beginning, Tony grew up surrounded by work. Not comfort, not luxury. Instead, long days, early mornings, and clear rules shaped his childhood. Farming was not optional. It was how the family survived, and Tony learned that before he fully understood what childhood meant. When Tony was 7 years old, his family moved to Bergwerd in Friesland. The move did not bring relief. It brought more land, more cows, and more responsibility. Tony watched closely as his parents worked. He learned how machines broke, how animals needed care every single day, and how mistakes carried real cost. Even though he was young, he understood that effort mattered. Later, Tony would say, "If the work isn't done, nothing else matters." At 15 years old, life shifted sharply. Tony's father suffered a permanent disability after a serious farm accident. The farm did not stop. Bills still came. Animals still needed food. Tony was forced to step into adult responsibility almost overnight. He lifted heavy equipment, managed machines, and worked full days without rest. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. This period formed Tony's first real test under pressure. The expected reaction for a teenager would be fear or collapse. Instead, Tony responded with routine. Day after day, he showed up. He worked through cold mornings, physical pain, and exhaustion. Not only did he survive, but he also learned control. He learned how to stay calm when things went wrong. He learned how to fix problems instead of talking about them. The farm taught him patience, toughness, and endurance. It also taught him limits. Weather could ruin weeks of effort. A single accident could change everything. Tony began to understand that hard work alone was not enough. Direction mattered. Risk mattered. He later said, "You can work all day and still go nowhere if you don't choose right." In the late 1970s, Tony's personal life grew alongside his responsibilities. He formed a steady relationship with Minnie, his childhood neighbor. Their bond was built on shared work and shared understanding. There was no rush, no noise, and no drama, just consistency. This steady partnership would later become one of the strongest foundations of his life. In 1980, Tony and Minnie made a life-changing decision. They emigrated to Canada. This was not an easy move. They were newcomers with limited resources. They settled near Salmon Arm, British Columbia, and started a dairy farm. Cold winters, isolation, and endless work followed. However, Tony adjusted quickly. Farming in a new country still meant survival through effort. The Canadian farm tested them daily. Long hours stretched into endless weeks. Money was tight and rest was rare, but Tony relied on routine, not panic, not excuses, just work. Every day followed the same rhythm: feed the animals, fix the machines, manage the farm. This steady discipline allowed him to keep moving forward even when the future felt uncertain and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. Farming taught him patience, endurance, and the quiet strength needed to survive long, hard days. Yet beneath the routine, Tony was changing. Farming was familiar, but it no longer felt like the final path. Nights were for planning. He studied gold maps, read about the Yukon, and imagined a life where effort met reward directly, not just because gold promised money, but also because it offered control over outcomes. Farming depended on weather, seasons, and luck. Gold could be shaped with strategy, skill, and patience. This was his hidden reality. By day, Tony was the hard-working farmer, tending chores, maintaining equipment, and keeping the family afloat. By night, he became a planner, a strategist, and a dreamer. He prepared quietly, understanding that waiting too long could be more dangerous than failing. Standing still costs more than people think, he would say. These hours of study and imagination became the foundation for the life he would build, one defined by risk, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of gold. By 1984, Tony was ready. His childhood had trained his body. His losses had trained his mind. And when gold whispered from the Yukon, Tony didn't just listen. He reinvented himself in the harshest wilderness imaginable, the Klondike Gamble. In 1984, Tony Beets left farming behind and moved north to Dawson City in the Yukon Territory. The move was not smooth, not safe, and not certain. Instead of cows and fields, he faced ice, mud, and machines. This was the Klondike, a place where gold had shaped history and broken people. Tony did not arrive as an owner. He arrived as a worker, a machine operator, one man among many, trying to survive. By day, Tony ran heavy equipment. He drove machines that sprayed high-pressure water, cut through frozen ground, and shifted tons of earth. By night, he studied maps, notes, and old reports. This was his double life. Not comfort and ease, but labor and learning. Not fame and money, but effort and patience. Even though the work drained his body, his mind stayed alert. The days were long, often more than 12 hours, sometimes closer to 16. Temperatures dropped far below freezing, metal burned the skin, engines failed, water froze. Tony worked anyway, not just because he needed the pay, but also because he wanted knowledge. He once said, "Up here the ground teaches you. If you pay attention, it tells you where the gold is." Pay was modest, risk was high, accidents were common, machines slipped, dredges clogged, hoses snapped under pressure. Tony saw men quit. He saw men leave injured. Instead of rushing, he observed. Instead of complaining, he learned. His routine was simple, steady, and strict. Work, rest, study, again and again. This two-shift rhythm shaped him. By daylight, he followed orders. By night, he made plans. These two worlds were not separate, they fed each other. What he saw during the day helped him think at night. What he studied at night shaped his choices the next day. Tony later explained, "You don't beat this place with speed, you beat it with time." While others chased visible gold, Tony chased patterns. He read old Klondike rush reports from decades earlier. He tracked river bends, flood paths, and soil layers. He noticed where early miners stopped digging, not because there was no gold, but because they lacked tools. Tony believed the ground still held secrets. Slowly, he began buying small claims. Paradise Hill, Scrivener Creek, places others ignored, not popular, not proven, but affordable. This was a gamble. Money was tight. Failure would mean starting over. However, Tony trusted preparation over luck. The emotional cost was heavy. Isolation pressed in. The Yukon winters were long and silent. Darkness stretched for hours. Tony was far from family, far from comfort. He felt the weight of risk daily. Even though doubt crept in, he stayed steady. He believed quitting early was the real loss. Early accidents tested him. Equipment failures caused delays. Water flow changed suddenly. Ice damaged dredges. Each setback cost time and money. The expected reaction would be frustration. Instead, Tony adjusted. He fixed problems, changed angles, and kept moving. This response became his pattern. His strategy was quiet but firm. He reinvested earnings instead of spending them. He upgraded machines slowly. He focused on control, not only of equipment, but also of himself and his crew. Tony believed discipline mattered more than strength. As he said, "If you lose control, the mind takes everything." By the late 1980s, results began to show. His claims produced consistent returns. Not massive strikes, but steady gold. Ounces added up. Weeks turned into seasons. Tony was no longer just an operator, he was becoming an owner, a planner, a builder. Yet relief did not come. Success brought more pressure. More machines meant more risk. More land meant more responsibility. There were permits to consider, weather to manage, and workers to protect. Tony worked more hours, not fewer. He pushed through exhaustion, not to impress others, but to stay ahead of failure. His reputation grew quietly. Other miners noticed his consistency. Fans and viewers did not exist yet. There were no cameras, just cold air and hard ground. Tony stayed focused. He once stated, "You earn respect here by lasting, not by talking." By 1990, Tony had laid the foundation of his mining life. He owned claims others once ignored. He understood the land deeply. He had survived accidents, losses, and isolation, not through luck, but through patience, planning, and relentless work. Tony was not just loud, stubborn, or brash. Beneath the surface, he was careful, observant, and disciplined. Every move he made was calculated, every machine he handled was studied, and every claim he worked on was measured for long-term gain. His work was methodical, repetitive, and exhausting, yet it built results that were slow, steady, and hard-earned. The Klondike did not grant success overnight. It tested him daily, forcing him to survive cold, danger, and unrelenting pressure. But everything was about to shift. New challenges emerged, bigger risks, harder decisions, and pressures that even Tony's years of grit and experience could barely withstand. Gold Rush fame. By 2010, Tony Beets had already spent decades in the Yukon. He had survived cold seasons, broken machines, and silent risks. He had built claims, crews, and systems that worked. However, everything changed when television entered the mine. In 2011, Tony appeared in Season 2 of the Discovery Channel series Gold Rush. What looked like a new opportunity quickly became a new kind of pressure. At first, the cameras felt simple. They followed machines, they followed mud, they followed loud moments and sharp words. Fans, viewers, and audiences quickly noticed Tony. His voice was strong, his rules were clear, his machines were massive. Not just because he was loud, but also because he was confident. Not only did he mine gold, but he also commanded attention. However, fame did not slow the work. Instead, it added weight. Mining schedules stayed tight. Weather stayed harsh. Machines still broke. But now there were filming schedules, crew interviews, and long production days layered on top. Tony often worked more than 18 hours a day. Mornings began with equipment checks. Afternoons focused on moving ground. Evenings handled planning. Nights were for reviewing problems. There was no room to rest. Success arrived fast. Within a few seasons, Tony's operations produced millions of dollars in gold. His dredges processed thousands of yards of material each season. Some seasons crossed several thousand ounces of gold. These numbers excited the audience. But behind the scenes, every ounce carried risk. One failed pump could cost tens of thousands of dollars. One wrong move could stop everything. The expected reaction to fame would be comfort, slowing down, enjoying attention. However, Tony responded with more work. He tightened routines. He raised standards. He demanded focus. He believed visibility required reliability. As he once said, "When the cameras show up, the work still has to be done right." This was success without relief. The audience saw gold totals. Tony saw danger. Dredges ran under pressure. Water levels changed without warning. Weather storms arrived suddenly. Crews worked around spinning equipment, deep ponds, and heavy steel. Accidents were always close. Even though nothing catastrophic happened on screen, risk never left. The television world also brought conflict. Crew arguments felt bigger on camera. Mistakes felt louder. Every decision was watched. Every failure was replayed. Mining errors that once stayed private now became public. Tony was forced to manage not just gold but also image. Not only machines but also people and perception. Production pressure followed strict timelines. Filming days were long, retakes happened, interviews interrupted work. However, mining could not wait. Gold seasons were short. Yukon summers offered limited time. Tony balanced two clocks. One was nature, the other was television. Nature never waited. This created a double pressure cycle. Career pressure increased. Public expectations grew. Fans wanted drama. Producers wanted moments. Tony wanted safety and results. The expected reaction would be compromise. Instead, Tony held his ground. He refused unsafe stunts. He insisted machines run properly. He kept the same tone, the same rules, the same discipline. Physical pressure also increased. Long days on site, cold rain, wet ground, loud engines. Over the years, fatigue built. However, Tony refused to slow down. He believed routine protected people. As he explained, If you change how you work just for TV, someone gets hurt. Financial pressure stayed constant. Even with high gold totals, costs were massive. Fuel, repairs, wages, permits, and transport drained income fast. One dredge breakdown could cost thousands in a single day. Tony understood this balance deeply. The show brought attention, but it did not remove risk. Behind the scenes, there were rules viewers never saw. Safety checks, permit limits, water flow restrictions, environmental controls. Failure to follow them could shut operations down. Tony carried this weight quietly. He rarely explained it on camera, but it guided every decision. The audience often focused on Tony's temper. However, his anger came from urgency. Time mattered. Safety mattered. Precision mattered. Not because he enjoyed control, but because mistakes cost lives. He believed repetition built survival. Same checks, same routes, same rules. As seasons continued, Tony became one of the most recognizable figures on the show. Viewers loved the scale. Fans quoted his lines. However, the pressure never eased. Fame did not replace fear. It amplified it. Every season brought higher expectations, bigger numbers, bigger risks. By 2015, Tony's operation stood as one of the largest on the show. His machines were enormous, his crews were experienced, his gold totals were impressive, yet relief never arrived. Instead, pressure stacked higher, institutional pressure grew, regulators watched closely, the industry shifted, rules tightened. Television fame did not soften Tony Beets. It hardened routine. It sharpened discipline. It forced a balance between spectacle and survival. As Tony put it, "I don't mind for TV, I mind to make it home alive." While the world watched his rise, Tony carried quiet fear behind every decision. The cameras captured noise. They missed the silence after machines shut down. And as the show grew larger, a different kind of trouble waited ahead. One that cameras could not soften. One that would challenge his operation, his reputation, and his control. While fame raised Tony's profile, a single reckless moment would bring legal fire, public backlash, and a test he could not ignore. The hardest years. By 2014, Tony Beets stood at the height of his mining power. His dredges were massive. His crews were large. His gold totals were watched by fans, viewers, and audiences around the world. However, this period would test him more than cold winters or broken machines ever had. Not because of gold, but because of fire, water, and people. In 2014, one reckless moment changed everything. A crew member poured fuel into a dredge pond and set it on fire in what later became known as the Viking baptism. The act was filmed. It spread fast. What looked dramatic on screen became a serious legal problem off-screen. Regulators stepped in quickly. Under the Yukon Waters Act, Tony's company faced fines totaling more than $30,000. The expected reaction would have been anger, denial, or public blame. Instead, Tony shifted into control mode. He stopped the behavior, he faced the consequences, he focused on damage control. Not to protect fame, but to protect the operation. He later said, "One bad choice can cost everyone their job." This incident did not stand alone. It opened a door to deeper scrutiny. Regulators looked closer. Permits were reviewed. Water usage came under tighter rules. From 2015 onward, water became Tony's biggest enemy. Not cold, not machines. Water. Gold mining depends on water. Sluicing, washing, and dredging all require steady flow. When water permits were delayed, limited, or denied, operations slowed or stopped completely. Reservoirs dried, pumps sat idle, dredges shut down. Every lost day meant lost money. Some seasons put millions of dollars at risk. This created a new pressure. Institutional pressure rose. Bureaucratic rules tightened. The expected reaction would have been public protest or quitting. However, Tony responded with negotiation and patience. He attended meetings, he filed paperwork, he adjusted plans. Even though frustration built, he stayed focused. As he explained, "You fight the system, you lose time, you work with it, you might survive." Behind the scenes, exhaustion grew. Long days turned into longer nights. Tony balanced lawyers, regulators, crew leaders, and production teams. Not only did he manage machines, but also emotions, fear, and uncertainty. Crew tensions escalated. Some workers felt pressure. Others doubted the future. Arguments increased. Morale dropped. Accidents continued. Slips on wet ground. Equipment strain. Physical injuries from long hours. Nothing dramatic enough to stop everything, but enough to wear people down. Tony felt it too. His body slowed. His patience thinned. However, routine kept him steady. Same checks, same rules, same expectations. Extreme weather added another layer. Floods washed out roads. Droughts lowered water levels. Seasons shortened. Every delay tightened the clock. The mining world itself was changing. Environmental limits increased. Old methods no longer worked the same way. Tony had to adapt again. Financial pressure peaked during this time. Equipment still needed repairs. Crews still needed pay. Fuel costs stayed high. Gold prices shifted. When dredges stopped, money stopped. Tony understood this deeply. One stalled season could erase years of work. Yet he refused to panic. He believed calm decisions protected people. He once said, "If you rush when things go bad, you make it worse." On television, he looked loud and unbending. In reality, he acted as a negotiator, strategist, and protector. He balanced human risk, environmental rules, and financial survival every day, not just because he wanted gold, but also because dozens of families depended on the mine. The betrayal cut deep. The Viking baptism was not Tony's idea. It was done by someone inside his crew. Trust cracked. Tony tightened control. Rules became stricter. Behavior limits were enforced. Some workers left. Others stayed and adjusted. Leadership became heavier. Tony felt the weight. Even though fame had brought success, it also brought exposure. Every mistake was public. Every fine was reported. Every shutdown was questioned. Fans debated. Viewers judged. However, Tony stayed focused on survival, not approval. He believed consistency mattered more than popularity. By the early 2020s, water permit battles continued. Some seasons were shortened, others paused entirely. Planning became harder. Tony adapted equipment. He searched for new solutions. He reduced risk where possible, not because he wanted to quit, but because he wanted to last. This period tested emotional endurance. Isolation returned. Long waits, uncertain outcomes, quiet stress. The expected reaction would have been withdrawal. Instead, Tony leaned on routine. Wake, plan, adjust, repeat. He trusted process over emotion. As time went on, Tony's empire did not collapse. It bent, it slowed, it adjusted. Survival replaced expansion. Stability replaced growth. He accepted this shift. As he put it, gold does not care how loud you are. It rewards patience. By 2025, Tony Beets stood as something different from before. Not just a miner, not just a television figure, but a survivor of systems, rules, and pressure. Fire had tested his judgment. Water had tested his patience. People had tested his trust. And as the mining world continued to change, one truth became clear. Tony Beets was no longer fighting only the land. He was fighting time itself. And while his machines roared in the frozen ground, another challenge was forming far from the mine, one that gold could not fix. Because while Tony was building a future in the Yukon, life at home was preparing its hardest test yet: family and loss. Tony Beets' life during these years was shaped more by loss than by gold. Long before television, before fame, and before heavy machines filled his days, his world was built around family, responsibility, and quiet pressure. In 1978, Tony began dating Minnie. They grew up with similar values shaped by farming life, early labor, and limited comfort. Their bond was not rushed. It was built through patience, shared effort, and daily survival. From the beginning, Tony lived a double life. One side of him was physical and outward. He worked long hours, accepted hard jobs, and pushed his body to its limit. The other side was private and emotional. He worried about money, stability, and the future. Minnie saw both sides early. She understood that Tony did not express stress with words. he expressed it with work. In 1984, Tony and Minnie married. There was no pause in their lives, no celebration that slowed responsibility. Work continued. Bills remained, pressure increased. Marriage did not soften Tony. Instead, it made him more serious. Not just because he loved Minnie, but also because he now carried the weight of someone else's safety. Failure no longer belonged only to him. Tony later said, "If you want to survive, you work. Talking does not fix things." That belief shaped his marriage. He worked longer days, he rested less. He believed effort was protection. Minnie balanced the household, keeping calm while Tony pushed forward. Together, they formed a partnership based on function, trust, and endurance. In 1988, their first child, Kevin, was born. Tony felt pride, but also fear. Providing now meant more than food and shelter. It meant planning years ahead. Sleep became short. Worry became constant. Tony responded the only way he knew. He worked more. In 1990, Mike was born. The house grew louder, busier, and more demanding. Expenses increased. Time disappeared. Tony did not slow down. Instead, he tightened his routine. Not only because he wanted success, but also because he feared falling behind. He believed falling behind meant failing his family. By the early 1990s, Bianca joined the family. Life became even more crowded. Minnie managed the emotional load of the household. Tony managed the physical and financial burden. Their roles were different, but neither was lighter. They rarely discussed fear openly. Instead, they focused on keeping the family moving. Then came 1992. Jasmine was born. She lived only 2.5 months. Her death changed the structure of the Beets family. The loss did not arrive loudly. It arrived quietly and stayed. The house felt empty, even when full. Days continued because they had to. Children still needed care. Work still demanded effort. But everything felt heavier. Tony later said, "When you lose a child, you carry it every day, even when you do not talk about it." He did not collapse outwardly. He became quieter, more controlled, and more focused. Even though grief pressed heavily, he believed stopping would make it worse. He worked to stay upright. Minnie grieved openly. Tony grieved inwardly. Their pain looked different, but it moved together. Loss did not divide them. It strengthened their bond, not just because they shared sorrow, but also because they shared responsibility. They protected each other without needing words. During this period, Tony worked an average of 12 to 14 hours a day. Some weeks stretched beyond 70 hours. Physical exhaustion became constant. Emotional isolation followed. He rarely slept fully. He carried guilt for being away and guilt for needing to work. There was no relief. Tony also faced early work-related accidents during these years. Farming and machinery brought regular risk. Slips, strains, and close calls were common. Heavy equipment demanded focus even when tired. Tony learned to operate under fatigue. Mistakes could cost fingers, limbs, or lives. These dangers shaped his respect for machines and fear of carelessness. He later said, "Machines do not forgive mistakes." That lesson followed him into mining years later. The death of Jasmine changed Tony's relationship with risk. He became more cautious with people even though he remained aggressive with work. He pushed machines hard, but watched humans closely. Loss taught him that people were not replaceable. Equipment could be fixed. Children could not. By 1993, Monica was born. New life entered a house shaped by grief. Joy returned carefully. Tony did not celebrate loudly. He observed quietly. He protected fiercely. He worked steadily. The family learned to hold happiness and fear together. As the years went on, Tony's children, especially Kevin, Mike, and Monica, began to take leadership roles in the family business. Farming skills were passed down. Work ethic was ingrained. Responsibility was shared. Tony's approach was direct. He pushed his children to learn quickly, make decisions, and manage risk. On television, tension sometimes played out for viewers. Kevin or Mike would question his decisions. Mistakes on claims sparked arguments. Yet beneath the harsh words and tough mining culture was deep respect and love. Tony understood that teaching leadership required discipline, confrontation, and patience. He later said, "You can't protect them from everything, you teach them or they fail." During the early 2010s, the Beets family balance became even more complicated. Fame from Gold Rush added pressure to family operations. Fans, viewers, and audiences now observed their work. Cameras recorded their successes, mistakes, and arguments. Public scrutiny amplified personal stress. Not only were Tony's children learning mining skills, but they were learning public responsibility. Their decisions affected machines, money, permits, and reputation. Tony managed all of this while continuing to mine personally, oversee finances, and ensure compliance with regulations. Tony's physical endurance, emotional resilience, and family leadership were constantly tested. The family's net worth in 2025 is estimated between $15 and $22 million. But that figure hides the real cost: broken nights of sleep, financial risks, near misses with heavy machinery, legal fines, and unrecorded injuries. Not just because gold is hard to extract, but also because family, crew, and environmental responsibilities weighed heavily on every ounce mined. Tony later said, "Every challenge teaches you something. Gold is patient, but you can't wait forever." Private loss, accidents, and emotional pressure did not end with childhood tragedies. Throughout the decades, the Beets family endured broken machinery, flooding, close calls with dredges, and regulatory fines that threatened operations. These stresses added layers to Tony's public persona. Fans often saw a rough, loud, and blunt miner. They did not see sleepless nights, guilt, private grief, or negotiation with regulators. Behind gruff jokes and expletives were decades of survival, patience, and careful planning. Not to ignore personal feelings, but instead to protect his family and empire. Not only to mine gold, but to raise a family, teach children, and survive harsh Yukon winters. By the end, Tony had transformed loss into focus. He had transformed grief into discipline. He had transformed family tension into preparation for the challenges ahead. While personal tragedy shaped his heart, the world was about to witness Tony's rise, when Discovery Channel cameras would capture his work and introduce him to millions. But even with fame looming, the foundation built during these years, sacrifice, endurance, accidents, sorrow, and lessons learned, would define every decision, every relationship, and every ounce of gold that followed. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.